The night air stung my cheeks as I hurried down the wet sidewalk, my worn sneakers splashing through puddles that reflected the neon lights of downtown Chicago. My thin jacket did little against the October chill, but I couldn't afford better, not since Dad's medical bills had consumed our savings, and the eviction notice appeared on our apartment door 3 weeks ago. Just one more block, I whispered to myself, my breath forming small clouds that disappeared into the darkness. Angelini's stood at the corner, its elegant facade a stark contrast to the gritty neighborhood surrounding it. Warm golden light spilled from its windows, and even from outside I could smell the rich aroma of garlic, basil, and something else. Something expensive. The kind of place I could never afford to eat at, but hopefully, the kind of place where tips would be generous enough to cover our rent. I paused before the heavy wooden door, checking my reflection in the window. My dark hair was pulled back into a neat ponytail, my face scrubbed clean of makeup except for a touch of mascara. The required uniform, black pants and white button-up, hung a bit loose on my frame. I'd lost weight worrying about Dad, about money, about everything. "You can do this, Ellie," I murmured, straightening my shoulders before pulling open the door. The warmth enveloped me immediately, along with the soft strains of classical music and the gentle clink of silverware against fine china. The hostess, a polished woman with perfect hair, gave me a thin smile when I explained I was there for my first shift. "Mr. Caruso mentioned you'd be starting tonight," she said, looking me over with barely concealed judgment. "Follow me." She led me through the dining room, past tables covered with crisp white linens and adorned with fresh flowers and flickering candles. The patrons were well-dressed, laughing softly over wine glasses that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. I felt the familiar knot of inadequacy tighten in my stomach. The kitchen was a different world. Bright, loud, chaotic. Men in white coats barked orders in Italian and English. Steam rose from enormous pots, and the smell of fresh bread made my empty stomach ache. "Maria will train you," the hostess said, nodding toward a petite woman arranging appetizers on a tray. "Don't disappoint Mr. Caruso. He rarely gives second chances." I swallowed hard. "I won't." The night passed in a blur of memorized specials, careful balancing of trays, and trying desperately not to spill anything on the immaculate tablecloths. Maria was patient but firm, correcting my pronunciation of the Italian dishes and showing me exactly how Mr. Caruso liked things done. "The wineglasses must be arranged just so," she demonstrated, her fingers moving with practiced precision. "Mr. Caruso notices everything." "What's he like?" I asked, trying to sound casual. I'd never met the owner who had miraculously hired me on the spot after a 5-minute interview, where he'd asked few questions, but watched me with unnerving intensity. Maria's expression shifted subtly. "Professional," she said carefully. "Very particular." Before I could press further, the kitchen fell suddenly, dramatically silent. The change was so abrupt it was as if someone had muted the room. I turned to see what had caused the shift. He stood in the doorway between the dining room and kitchen, and even if Maria hadn't whispered, "Mr. Caruso," I would have known who he was. Authority radiated from him like heat from a flame. He couldn't have been more than 35, his dark hair perfectly cut, his posture impeccable in a suit that I instinctively knew cost more than 6 months of my rent. But it was his eyes that held me frozen, dark as espresso, taking in everything with calculated precision. Behind him loomed 2 men, their bulky frames unsuited for the elegant restaurant. One scanned the kitchen continuously, his hand never far from the inside of his jacket. The other remained by the door, speaking quietly into what appeared to be an earpiece. Mr. Caruso moved through the kitchen like a shark through still waters, unhurried but unmistakably dangerous. Every chef, every server, every dishwasher straightened as he passed. He inspected a sauce with a slight nod, examined the plating of a dish with narrowed eyes, all without speaking a single word. When his gaze landed on me, my heart stuttered. For a moment that stretched like taffy, he studied me, his expression unreadable. Then his lips curved in what might have been a smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Eleanor," he said, my name somehow sounding different in his mouth. Not the casual Ellie I'd grown accustomed to, but all 3 syllables, pronounced with deliberate care. "Mr. Caruso," I managed, my voice embarrassingly small. "Your first night." It wasn't a question. "How are you finding it?" "Everyone has been very helpful," I said, acutely aware of Maria tensing beside me and the kitchen staff watching with barely concealed interest. He nodded once, then turned his attention to the head chef, leaving me to exhale a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "He remembered your name," Maria whispered when he was out of earshot, her eyes wide. "Is that unusual?" Her laugh was humorless. "He has 3 restaurants and over 100 employees. He remembers the names of people who matter to him." She gave me a strange look. "Be careful, Eleanor." The warning lingered as I finished my shift, collecting tips that exceeded my expectations. As I counted the cash in the break room, I calculated how much would go to Dad's medications, how much to our overdue rent, how little would remain for food. "Eleanor," I startled, nearly dropping the bills. Mr. Caruso stood in the doorway, alone now without his shadows. "You did well tonight," he said, entering the small room with measured steps. The space seemed to shrink around his presence. "Any issues?" "No, sir," I said, quickly gathering my things. "Thank you again for the opportunity." "You live in Bridgeport." Again, not a question. He knew where I lived. The realization sent an odd shiver down my spine. "Yes." "It's late. My driver will take you home." "That's not necessary." "I insist." His tone made it clear this wasn't a suggestion. Chicago isn't safe at this hour, especially for a young woman alone. Before I could protest further, he gestured toward the back exit where a sleek black car idled, its windows tinted to opacity. The same man who'd been scanning the kitchen stood beside it, opening the rear door as we approached. "Marco will see you safely home," Mr. Caruso said, his hand coming to rest lightly on the small of my back as he guided me toward the car. The touch, though brief, burned through my thin shirt. "I'll expect you tomorrow, 6 o'clock sharp." The interior of the car was buttery leather and the subtle scent of expensive cologne. Marco didn't speak as he pulled away from the curb, and I found myself staring out the window, mind reeling from the strange evening. As we drove through darkened streets, my phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Gonzalez, our elderly neighbor who'd been checking on Dad while I worked. "He's asking for you. Fever worse. Might need doctor." My stomach dropped. We couldn't afford another hospital visit, another prescription, another anything. When the car stopped outside our shabby apartment building, I thanked Marco and hurried inside, the weight of worry crushing my momentary relief at the successful first shift. Dad was awake, his face flushed with fever, when I entered our small apartment. Mrs. Gonzalez had left him with fresh water and his evening pills, but his breathing was labored, his eyes glassy. "There's my girl," he said, voice cracking. "How was the fancy new job?" "It was good," I said, forcing a smile as I pressed my hand to his forehead. "Too hot. Really good tips." "Told you things would turn around," he mumbled, eyes drifting closed. "Always knew you were the lucky one." I bit my lip to keep from crying. There was nothing lucky about our situation. Dad had been a construction foreman before the accident that crushed his spine. Then came the surgeries, the infections, the complications, and finally, the letter from the insurance company declining further coverage. Now we subsisted on his meager disability checks and whatever I could cobble together from part-time work. After he fell asleep, I counted out his pills for the morning, noting with growing panic that his prescription would need refilling in 3 days. $300 we didn't have. Sleep eluded me that night, worry and the lingering sensation of Mr. Caruso's dark eyes on me keeping me restless. There had been something in his gaze, something assessing, calculating, as if he were solving a complex equation with me at its center. The morning came too soon, gray light filtering through our thin curtains. I moved quietly, making Dad breakfast and helping him to the bathroom, before I had to leave for my second job, a morning shift at a cafe 8 blocks away. "Your uniform smells like garlic and money," Dad joked weakly as I kissed his forehead goodbye. "Get some rest," I told him, tucking the blanket around his too thin frame. "Mrs. Gonzalez will check on you at noon." The cafe was a stark contrast to Angelini's, bright fluorescence instead of candlelight, chipped laminate instead of polished wood, customers who counted out coins for their coffee instead of casually ordering $100 bottles of wine. By the time my shift ended, my feet ached, and my head throbbed from the constant noise. I had just enough time to hurry home, check on Dad, shower, and change before heading to Angelini's again. I was halfway home when a black car identical to the one from last night pulled alongside me. The window lowered to reveal Marco's impassive face. "Miss Eleanor," he said with a nod. "Mr. Caruso sent me." My steps faltered. "Sent you? Why?" "To drive you," he said simply, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I wasn't due at the restaurant for hours. Mr. Caruso's instructions were clear. Marco's tone suggested further argument would be futile. Hesitantly, I slid into the back seat, confusion mingling with an inexplicable flutter of something I couldn't name. "My apartment first," I said firmly. "I need to check on my father." Marco nodded once and pulled away from the curb. When we arrived, he surprised me by exiting the car and following me to the building's entrance. "Mr. Caruso's instructions," he said again when I raised an eyebrow. The apartment was quiet when I entered. Dad sleeping peacefully for once, I changed quickly, hyper-aware of Marco waiting outside, and left Mrs. Gonzalez a note with money for her to order dinner for herself and Dad. Back in the car, my curiosity finally overcame my caution. Why is Mr. Caruso doing this? Sending cars for a waitress? Marco's eyes met mine briefly in the rearview mirror, something like sympathy passing through them. Mr. Caruso values his employees' safety. Does he send cars for all his employees? The question hung unanswered as we pulled up to the restaurant's rear entrance, where Mr. Caruso himself stood waiting, a cigarette between his fingers sending tendrils of smoke into the evening air. As I exited the car, his eyes tracked my movement, that same calculating look from yesterday, present in their depths. "Eleanor," he said, extinguishing the cigarette under a polished shoe. "You're early." "Your driver didn't give me much choice," I replied before I could stop myself. Instead of anger, a flash of amusement crossed his face. "Marco can be efficient." His gaze traveled over me, noting my damp hair and the slight flush in my cheeks from rushing. "Come, there's something I want to show you before your shift begins." I followed Mr. Caruso through a side door I hadn't noticed during my first shift. Unlike the bustling kitchen or the elegant dining room, this corridor was quiet, the carpet thick enough to muffle our footsteps. The walls were adorned with black and white photographs of what I assumed was Italy. Narrow streets, ancient buildings, people caught in moments of laughter decades ago. "My grandfather's hometown," Mr. Caruso said, noticing my gaze lingering on a particular image of an elderly man standing proudly before a small restaurant, near Naples. He came to America with nothing but the clothes he wore and his mother's recipes. There was a hint of something almost soft in his voice, at odds with the hard lines of his face. "Is that how Angelini's began?" I asked, genuinely curious. A shadow passed over his features. "Not exactly." Before I could ask what he meant, we reached a heavy wooden door. Mr. Caruso produced a key from his pocket and unlocked it, gesturing for me to enter before him. The office beyond was unexpected. Warm, almost cozy, with bookshelves lining one wall and a large desk of dark polished wood dominating the space. A leather sofa sat beneath a window overlooking the restaurant's private garden, currently illuminated by strings of delicate lights that reminded me of fireflies. "Sit," he said, indicating one of the chairs across from his desk. I perched on the edge, hyper-aware of the expensive surroundings, and the man watching me with that same unreadable expression. Up close, I noticed details I'd missed before, a thin scar that traced his jawline, the signet ring on his right hand, the way his shoulders filled out his tailored suit with the unmistakable breadth of someone who made physical fitness a priority. "Your father is ill," he said abruptly. My breath caught. "How did you—" "I make it my business to know who works for me, Eleanor." He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled beneath his chin. "Spinal cord injury 2 years ago, subsequent infections, insurance complications. Each fact, delivered with clinical precision. A chill ran through me despite the room's warmth. That's private information." Privacy is a luxury few can truly afford. His eyes never left mine. You've been working 2 jobs to support him and pay for his medications. The cafe in the mornings, now here in the evenings. Before that, the grocery store on Halstead. And before that, the nursing home on 35th Street. Fear and indignation warred within me. Have you been investigating me? As I said, I'm particular about who works for me. He opened a drawer and withdrew a manila folder, placing it on the desk between us. Your previous employer spoke highly of your work ethic. Your neighbor, Mrs. Gonzalez, mentioned your devotion to your father. Your landlord, however, indicated you're 3 months behind on rent. My cheeks burned with humiliation. I don't understand why my financial situation matters to you, because I'm offering you a solution. He pushed the folder toward me. Open it. With trembling fingers, I complied. Inside was what appeared to be an employment contract, the terms outlined in precise legal language. My eyes widened as I saw the salary figure, nearly 3 times what I would make combining both my current jobs. This is a mistake, I said, looking up at him in confusion. No mistake. His lips curved slightly. I'm offering you a position as my personal assistant, but I don't have any experience. You're organized, punctual, and discreet. The rest can be learned. He gestured to the contract. The position includes comprehensive health insurance that would cover your father's medical needs, and I own several properties, including a ground-floor apartment in a secure building that would be better suited to someone with mobility issues. My mind reeled with suspicion and desperate hope. It was too good to be true. People like Mr. Caruso didn't offer salvation to people like me without wanting something in return. Why? I asked, my voice barely audible. Why would you do this for someone you just met? Something flickered in his eyes, a calculation, a decision made. Let's just say I recognize potential when I see it. He stood and moved to a cabinet, withdrawing 2 crystal glasses and a decanter filled with amber liquid. To celebrate your decision, he said, pouring a measure into each glass. I haven't decided anything, I protested weakly, though we both knew it was a lie. The promise of medical care for Dad, of financial stability, of not having to choose between rent and prescriptions. It was everything I'd been praying for. He placed a glass before me, his fingers brushing against mine in a touch that seemed deliberate. Consider it then. Take the contract home. Review it with your father. I hesitated, then slipped the folder into my bag. Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Caruso. I should get to my shift now. Call me Dante, he said, his voice dropping to a register that seemed to vibrate through my chest. And take tonight off. Start fresh tomorrow, as my assistant, not as a waitress. I started to protest, thinking of the lost tips, but he raised a hand, silencing me. Your salary begins today, regardless of your decision. Consider it a sign of good faith. As if summoned by an invisible signal, the door opened, and Marco appeared, ready to escort me back through the corridor. I rose on unsteady legs, clutching my bag and the impossible opportunity it now contained. Eleanor, Dante called as I reached the door. I turned back to find him watching me with an intensity that stole my breath. I expect your answer by tomorrow morning. The drive home passed in a blur, my mind racing with possibilities and warnings. It wasn't until I was climbing the stairs to our apartment that rationality began to reassert itself. Men like Dante Caruso didn't pluck waitresses from obscurity and offer them life-changing positions after a single shift. There had to be a catch, a price I wasn't seeing. Dad was awake when I entered, his eyes brightening at the sight of me. You're home early, he said, muting the small television we'd managed to keep when we'd sold most of our belongings to cover his first surgery. I sat beside him on the worn sofa, the folder heavy in my hands. Something unexpected happened. His brow furrowed as I explained the bizarre turn of events, his expression shifting from confusion to suspicion to cautious hope as I showed him the contract. This man, he said slowly, the restaurant owner. What exactly does he want from you, Ellie? The question hung between us, loaded with implication. He says he sees potential, I replied, the words sounding hollow even to my own ears. Dad's hand covered mine, his palm rough from years of physical labor. Men like that, Rich men. They don't just hand out opportunities without expecting something in return. I know, I whispered. But Dad, look at these medical benefits. And there's an apartment. Ground level, no stairs for you to navigate. We wouldn't have to worry about eviction anymore. His eyes, so like my own, searched my face. At what cost, though? Your happiness? Your safety? I had no answer for him. Instead, I helped him take his evening medication, changed his bandages, and listened as he eventually drifted off to sleep, his breathing labored even in rest. After he was settled, I sat at our small kitchen table, reading through the contract line by line. The terms were generous, almost suspiciously so, but I could find no hidden clauses, no sinister fine print that might explain Dante's motivations. Near midnight, my phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. Have you made your decision? D. My fingers hovered over the screen. How had he gotten my number? Another reminder of how much he already knew about me, how little I knew about him. Instead of replying, I opened my laptop and typed Dante Caruso Chicago into the search bar. The results were sparse. Mentions of his restaurants, a few society page photos showing him at charity galas, always with different women, always somehow separate from the crowds around him. Nothing about his background, his family, how he'd acquired the wealth so evident in everything from his clothes to his car. It was as I was about to close my computer that I noticed an article buried several pages deep in the search results. Local business owner questioned in disappearance of former associate. The piece, dated 3 years ago, mentioned Dante briefly, noting that he had been cleared of any involvement. But something about it left an uneasy feeling in the pit of my stomach. My phone chimed again. I don't appreciate being ignored, Eleanor. The message sent a chill down my spine. I quickly typed back, still considering. We'll have an answer tomorrow as promised. His reply came instantly. See that you do. Sleep eluded me that night, my mind cycling through scenarios and possibilities. By dawn, exhaustion had made the decision for me. We needed the money. Dad needed the medical care, and I would deal with whatever complications came with accepting Dante's offer. I texted my acceptance at 6 a.m., not expecting an immediate response. But my phone rang seconds later. Good choice. Dante's voice was smooth, satisfied. Marco will collect you at 8. Pack what you need for the day. We'll arrange the move to the new apartment by the end of the week. My father will be well cared for during the transition. I've arranged for a home health aide to assist him today while you're working. Before I could respond, he had hung up, leaving me staring at my phone in disbelief. True to his word, Marco arrived precisely at 8, helping me into the now familiar black car. Instead of heading to Angelini's, however, we drove deeper into downtown, eventually pulling up before a gleaming high-rise that seemed to touch the clouds. Mr. Caruso's primary office, Marco explained, opening my door. 18th floor. The lobby was all marble and glass, security guards stationed discreetly but obviously at various points. A woman with a severe bun and sharper eyes met me at the elevator. Eleanor Bennett, she said, her tone making it clear this wasn't a question. I'm Vivian, Mr. Caruso's executive administrator. I'll be showing you your duties. The elevator ride was silent, Vivian's perfume too strong in the confined space. When the doors opened, we stepped into a reception area decorated in shades of gray and black. The Caruso Enterprises logo, a stylized lion, emblazoned on the wall behind a sleek desk. You'll primarily work from here, Vivian said, indicating a smaller desk positioned to the side of what I assumed was Dante's office. Managing his schedule, screening calls, handling correspondence. The technical aspects I can teach you, but the most important part of this job is discretion. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Mr. Caruso values his privacy above all else. Of course, I murmured, trying to look as though I belonged in this world of floor-to-ceiling windows and furniture that probably cost more than a year's rent. Vivian handed me a tablet, his schedule for today. Memorize it. You'll accompany him to all meetings, take notes, and anticipate his needs before he has to ask. I glanced down at the screen, my eyes widening at the list of names. Several I recognized as prominent business figures in Chicago, others complete mysteries to me. Don't be intimidated, came Dante's voice from behind us. Most of them are far less intelligent than they'd like the world to believe. He stood in the doorway to his office. Different somehow in this setting. Harder. Colder. The brief glimpse of warmth I'd seen when he spoke of his grandfather nowhere to be found. His suit was charcoal today, his tie the deep red of old blood. His expression unreadable as he assessed me. "The blue looks good on you," he said, nodding toward the dress I'd chosen, one of the few professional outfits I owned, purchased for job interviews and hopelessly out of date. Vivian's eyebrows rose fractionally at the comment. "Thank you," I said, unsure how else to respond. "We'll need to update your wardrobe," he continued, gesturing dismissively at my scuffed shoes. "Vivian, arrange an appointment with Madeline for tomorrow. The full package." "Yes, Mr. Caruso," Vivian replied, making a note on her own tablet. "Now," he said, turning back to me. "Shall we begin?" The day passed in a whirlwind of meetings, phone calls, and trying desperately to keep up with Dante's rapid-fire instructions. He moved through the business world like a shark through water, predatory, precise, seemingly omniscient about his competitors' weaknesses and his own advantages. I observed how others reacted to him, with fear thinly disguised as respect, with obsequious smiles that never reached their eyes, with the careful deference shown to someone both wealthy and dangerous. By late afternoon, my head was spinning with new information, my hand cramped from taking notes, my stomach empty since I'd been too nervous to eat the lunch Dante had ordered for us. "You're a quick study," he said, as we rode the elevator down to the parking garage, now alone for the first time since morning. "Vivian rarely approves of anyone so quickly." I doubted that was true, given Vivian's pinched expression every time I asked a question, but I nodded anyway. "It's a lot to take in. You'll adapt." It wasn't encouragement, but a statement of fact, as though my success was already determined in his mind. The black car waited for us in the garage, Marco standing at attention beside the open door. As we approached, I noticed another vehicle parked nearby, an SUV with tinted windows and two men inside, their postures alert despite their casual clothing. "Security," Dante said, following my gaze. A necessary precaution in my position. The statement raised more questions than it answered, but I held my tongue as we slid into the back seat. Instead of driving toward my apartment, we headed in the opposite direction. "Where are we going?" I asked, watching the familiar streets give way to the wealthier neighborhoods north of the river. "To see your new home," Dante replied, his attention on his phone. I had the property prepared today. My chest tightened with a mixture of anxiety and something like excitement. That was fast. I thought we had until the end of the week. He looked up, that calculating gaze fixed on me once more. "I don't believe in wasting time, Eleanor. Your father will be moved tomorrow. The medical equipment has already been delivered, and a nurse will visit daily to assist with his care." Thank you," I managed, the words inadequate for the magnitude of what he was offering, and for the unnerving speed with which he operated. "But I should be the one to help him adjust. He doesn't do well with strangers. You'll have time with him in the evenings," Dante said dismissively. "Your priority during the day is your work for me." There was a finality to his tone that silenced further protest. I turned to look out the window, watching as we pulled up to a sleek building in Lincoln Park, its facade all glass and steel. A doorman hurried to open the car door. "Mr. Caruso," he said with a deferential nod. "Everything is prepared as requested." Dante's hand came to rest on the small of my back as he guided me through the lobby, the touch proprietary in a way that made my skin prickle. The elevator required a key card, which Dante produced from his pocket. "The penthouse?" I asked, noticing he pressed the button for the top floor. A slight smile curved his lips. "No, that's my residence when I stay in the city. You'll be on the 4th floor." The revelation that I would be living in the same building as my employer sent a jolt of unease through me. The lines between professional and personal seemed to blur further with each passing hour. The apartment was nothing like I had imagined. Spacious and filled with light, it featured an open floor plan with gleaming hardwood floors and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a small park. The furniture was elegant yet comfortable, nothing like the sterile corporate style of his office. "The master bedroom has been modified for your father," Dante explained, leading me down a hallway. "Accessible bathroom, hospital-grade bed, everything the doctors recommended." I stepped into the room, momentarily speechless, It was perfect. Spacious enough for the medical equipment, but designed to look like a normal bedroom, not a hospital room. Someone had even placed framed photos on the nightstand, pictures of Dad and me that must have come from our apartment. "How did you get these?" I asked, picking up a photo of us at my high school graduation. "I had your belongings packed and brought over this afternoon." My head snapped up. "You went into our apartment? Without asking?" Something dangerous flickered in Dante's eyes. "I'm providing you with an opportunity most would be grateful for, Eleanor. Don't test my patience with petty concerns about privacy." The warning was clear in his voice. I swallowed my protest, reminding myself of what was at stake. Dad's health, our financial security, a future beyond living paycheck to paycheck. "I am grateful," I said carefully. "It's just overwhelming." His expression softened marginally. "Understandable, but you'll adapt quickly." He checked his watch. "I have a dinner meeting. Make yourself comfortable. Your key card is on the counter, along with a new phone. Use it for all communications moving forward." "A new phone?" I frowned. "What's wrong with mine?" "Security," he said simply. "Everything connected to me must be protected." Before I could question him further, he was moving toward the door. "I'll send Marco for you at 7 tomorrow morning. Rest well, Eleanor." After he left, I explored the apartment in a daze. The kitchen was fully stocked, the closet in my bedroom filled with new clothes in exactly my size. The bathroom supplied with expensive toiletries I'd only seen in magazines. It was as if Dante had anticipated my every need before I'd even agreed to work for him. The new phone sat on the counter, sleek and clearly high-end. When I turned it on, I found it already programmed with contacts. Dante's number, Marco's, Vivian's, and several others labeled only with initials. I called Dad from my old phone, explaining the sudden change in circumstances as best I could. He sounded worried, asking questions I had no answers for about Dante's motives and the strings attached to his generosity. "Just be careful, Ellie," he said, his voice weary. "Men with that kind of money and power, they operate by different rules." After we hung up, I stood at the window, watching darkness fall over the city. In the span of 48 hours, my life had been completely upended. I had gone from struggling waitress to personal assistant, from a cramped apartment on the verge of eviction to a luxury condo, and all because Dante Caruso had decided, for reasons I still didn't understand, that I was worth investing in. Sleep came fitfully that night, my dreams filled with Dante's watchful eyes and the sensation of being caught in a web I couldn't see. Morning arrived with a text message on the new phone. "Car waiting. Bring the blue file from the desk in the study." D. I found the file where he said it would be, though I hadn't noticed the study the night before. A small room off the living area, with a desk that held a laptop and several neatly arranged folders. The blue one was unmarked, and I resisted the urge to peek inside. Marco was waiting as promised, his expression as impassive as ever as he held the car door for me. "Good morning, Miss Eleanor. Just Eleanor is fine," I said, sliding into the back seat. His eyes met mine briefly in the rearview mirror. "Mr. Caruso prefers formality." The statement felt like another piece of a puzzle I was struggling to assemble. Who was Dante Caruso, really? A successful businessman with an unusual interest in helping a struggling waitress? Or something else entirely? We drove not to the office building from yesterday, but to Angelini's, which stood quiet and empty in the early morning light. Marco escorted me through a side entrance I hadn't used before, leading to a private dining room in the back of the restaurant. Dante sat alone at a table set for two, reading something on his tablet. He looked up as I entered, his gaze sliding over me in a way that made me acutely aware of the simple dress I'd chosen from the new wardrobe. "The file?" he asked by way of greeting. I handed it to him, watching as he flipped it open and scanned its contents with practiced efficiency. Whatever he saw seemed to satisfy him as he closed it and set it aside. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Have you eaten?" I shook my head, suddenly aware of how hungry I was after barely touching food the day before. He made a small gesture, and instantly a server appeared with plates of fresh fruit, pastries, and a steaming pot of coffee. "Eat," Dante said. "We have a busy day ahead." As I sipped the rich coffee, far better than anything I'd been able to afford before, He studied me with that same calculating expression. "Your father will be moved to the new apartment today," he said abruptly. "The medical transport has been arranged for noon. I've given you the afternoon off to help him settle in." Relief flooded through me. "Thank you. I appreciate that." "I take care of what's mine, Eleanor." The statement hung between us, loaded with implication. I wasn't just his employee. In some way I didn't fully understand yet. He considered me his. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, it sent a complicated thrill through my veins, a mixture of fear and something dangerously close to anticipation. "The restaurant," I said, desperate to change the subject. "Do you come here every morning?" "When I'm in Chicago," he replied, cutting a piece of fruit with precise movements. "I own the building above it as well. My private residence is on the top floor." I recalled what Maria had said about Dante having 3 restaurants. "And the others? Do you visit them as often?" Something like amusement flickered in his eyes. "Curious about me, Eleanor?" I felt heat rise to my cheeks. "I just want to understand who I'm working for." A reasonable desire. He set down his fork, giving me his full attention. "I own businesses throughout the city, restaurants, nightclubs, import companies, real estate. Some more visible than others, and before that?" I pressed, emboldened by his apparent openness. "You mentioned your grandfather came from Italy, but not how Angelini's began." The amusement vanished, replaced by a coolness that made me regret my question. "My family history is complex and not relevant to your position." "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to pry." "Yes, you did," he said. But there was no anger in his voice, only a sort of detached interest. "You're trying to solve the puzzle of why I've taken an interest in you. It's natural, but ultimately unnecessary. All you need to know is that I saw something in you worth cultivating, and I reward loyalty generously." Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression hardening. "Change of plans. We need to handle something at the docks." "The docks?" I echoed, confused. "One of my import businesses," he said, rising from the table. "Bring your tablet. You'll need to take notes." The ride to the harbor was tense, Dante making several phone calls in rapid Italian, his tone growing increasingly cold with each conversation. I sat silently beside him, trying to make sense of the fragments I could understand. Something about a shipment, a discrepancy in numbers, someone who needed to be dealt with. When we arrived, Marco opened the door, and I was surprised to see the same 2 men from the SUV in the parking garage now flanking our car. They scanned the surroundings with professional vigilance before nodding to Dante. "Wait here," he told me, his voice leaving no room for argument. Through the car window, I watched as he strode toward a warehouse, the men following close behind. For 20 minutes I sat alone in the car, the silence broken only by the distant sound of gulls and the occasional horn from ships in the harbor. When Dante returned, there was a different energy about him, a coiled tension that hadn't been there before. A smear of what looked disturbingly like blood marked the cuff of his otherwise immaculate shirt. "Is everything okay?" I asked, my voice small in the heavy silence. His eyes met mine, darker than I'd ever seen them. "It is now." A chill ran through me as Marco pulled away from the docks, the warehouse disappearing behind us. For the first time since accepting Dante's offer, I felt the full weight of what I might have gotten myself into, a world operating by rules I didn't understand, with consequences I couldn't begin to imagine. "Eleanor," Dante said, his voice softer now, almost gentle. "There are aspects of my business that aren't for your concern. Your job is to support me, not question me. Do you understand?" I nodded slowly, the pieces finally beginning to align in my mind. The security, the private entrances, the way people looked at him with fear rather than respect. Dante Caruso was more than a successful businessman, and I had just tied my fate to his. The afternoon found me in the new apartment, helping Dad adjust to his surroundings. The medical transport had been seamless, the team professional and gentle as they settled him into the hospital-grade bed that somehow managed to look like normal furniture. "This place," Dad whispered, his eyes wide as he took in the spacious room, the equipment discreetly integrated into the design. "Ellie, this must cost a fortune." I busied myself arranging his medications on the bedside table, avoiding his questioning gaze. Mr. Caruso is very generous with his employees. Too generous, Dad murmured. No one gives something for nothing. I couldn't argue with him. The same thought had been circling in my mind since the incident at the docks. That smear of blood, the cold darkness in Dante's eyes, the way he'd said, "It is now," when I'd asked if everything was okay. None of it aligned with the image of a legitimate businessman. A soft knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. I opened it to find a woman in her 50s, her practical clothes and kind eyes suggesting a nurse. "I'm Sarah," she said, offering her hand. "Mr. Caruso hired me to help with your father's care." Dad tensed visibly at the mention of Dante's name. "We don't need charity." Sarah's smile remained steady. "It's not charity, sir. It's part of Ms. Bennett's employment package. I'll be here weekdays while she's working, helping with medications, physical therapy, and whatever else you need." I shot Dad a pleading look. We both knew he needed the help, regardless of where it came from. He relented with a sigh. "Fine, but I'm not an invalid. I can still do some things for myself." "Of course," Sarah agreed easily. Independence is important for recovery. As she went about checking his vitals and reviewing his medication schedule, I retreated to the kitchen to make tea. My phone, the new one Dante had given me, buzzed with a message. "Is your father settled? D." The fact that he knew exactly when Dad had arrived sent another ripple of unease through me. How closely was he monitoring my movements? "Yes," I typed back. "The nurse is with him now." "Good. Car will collect you at 7 for dinner. Business discussion. Not a request, but a statement. Like everything with Dante. I considered refusing, staying with Dad for his first night in the new place. But something told me Dante Caruso wasn't a man accustomed to hearing no. "I'll be ready," I replied. The rest of the afternoon passed quickly as I unpacked our few belongings, arranged Dad's things the way he liked them, and tried to make the pristine apartment feel like home. Sarah proved to be competent and compassionate, winning Dad over despite his initial resistance when she mentioned she'd been an army nurse before retiring to private care. "Your boss must think highly of you," she commented as she prepared to leave. "Mr. Caruso doesn't usually get involved in the personal lives of his employees." "Did you work for him before?" I asked, seizing the opportunity to learn more. She hesitated, something cautious entering her expression. "I've helped with family members of his associates. Mr. Caruso values loyalty above all else." She picked up her bag, heading for the door. "I'll be back tomorrow at 7. After she left, Dad and I ate dinner together in his room, watching an old movie on the large television mounted on the wall. It was the most relaxed I'd seen him in months. Comfortable, pain-managed, no visible worry about bills or prescriptions shadowing his eyes. "This is nice," he admitted grudgingly, "but I still don't trust your boss's motives." "Neither do I said quietly. "But for now, this is what we need." At 6:30, I changed into one of the new dresses from the closet. A simple black sheath that fit perfectly, as if it had been tailored specifically for me. The thought that Dante might have had my measurements taken somehow was unsettling, but no longer surprising. Dad frowned when I told him I was going out. "Dinner with your boss? At night?" "Ellie, it's business," I assured him, though I wasn't convinced myself. "I won't be late. Just remember what I said about men like him," Dad warned. "They see something they want, they take it, no matter the cost." His words followed me down to the lobby, where Marco waited by the now familiar black car. The evening air was cool against my skin as he held the door, his expression as unreadable as ever. "Where are we going?" I asked as we pulled away from the curb. "Mr. Caruso's residence," Marco replied, his eyes meeting mine briefly in the rearview mirror. There was something there. Not quite a warning, but a caution. We drove to a part of the city I rarely visited, where historic mansions stood behind wrought iron gates, their manicured lawns and security systems announcing the wealth and power of their owners. Marco pulled up to one such property, larger and more imposing than its neighbors, set back from the road and surrounded by a stone wall. The gates opened silently as we approached, closing behind us as we followed a curved driveway to the front entrance. Unlike the modern glass and steel of his downtown buildings, Dante's home was old-world elegance, stone and brick, with ivy climbing the walls and windows that glowed with warm light. Marco escorted me to the door, which opened before we reached it. A man in a dark suit nodded respectfully. "Miss Bennett, Mr. Caruso is expecting you in the study." The interior was just as impressive as the exterior. Hardwood floors covered with antique rugs, walls adorned with what appeared to be original artwork, furnishings that spoke of old money and refined taste. It was nothing like the sleek modernity of his office or the comfortable luxury of the apartment he'd provided for Dad and me. This was a home built to impress, to intimidate, to announce its owner's power without saying a word. I followed the man down a hallway lined with photographs, Dante with various public figures, at charity events, at what appeared to be the opening of one of his restaurants. In each image, he stood slightly apart, watching rather than participating, that same calculating look in his eyes. The study door stood open, revealing a room lined with bookshelves and dominated by a massive desk. Dante sat behind it, his attention focused on the papers before him. He looked up as I entered, his gaze traveling over me in a way that made my skin warm. "The dress suits you," he said, rising from his chair. He'd changed since the morning, now wearing a perfectly tailored black suit with a crisp white shirt, open at the collar. "Would you like a drink?" I shook my head. I should keep a clear head for a business discussion. A slight smile curved his lips. "Always practical. One of the qualities I admire in you, Eleanor." He gestured to a door at the side of the study. "We'll eat in the private dining room, more comfortable for conversation." The room beyond was intimate, a round table set for two, candles providing most of the light, a view of the garden visible through French doors that stood open to the mild evening air. It felt distinctly unbusinesslike. "This seems personal," I said carefully as he pulled out my chair. Dante took his seat across from me, his dark eyes reflecting the candlelight. "Business and personal often intersect in my world. Surely you've realized that by now." A server appeared silently, pouring wine into Dante's glass and water into mine, then disappearing just as quietly. "Your father is comfortable?" Dante asked, though I suspected he already knew the answer. "Yes. The apartment, the nurse, it's all more than generous, as I said. I take care of what's mine." He lifted his glass, studying the deep red liquid. "And you are mine now, Eleanor, my employee, under my protection." The possessiveness in his tone sent a shiver through me, fear and something else, something I was reluctant to examine too closely. Is that what this dinner is about? Reminding me of my place? His laugh was low, unexpected. "Your directness is refreshing. Most people in my orbit learn to speak in careful circles, never asking the real questions. I'm not most people." "No," he agreed, his eyes never leaving mine. "You're not. That's precisely why you're here." The server returned with our first course, something artfully arranged that I barely tasted as Dante continued. "I brought you here to discuss your role moving forward. You've proven yourself observant and discreet, qualities I value highly." I thought of the docs, the blood on his cuff. "Discreet enough not to ask about things that don't concern me?" His expression hardened slightly. "Precisely. My business interests are diverse. Not all of them are meant for public scrutiny. Are they legal?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. For a long moment, Dante simply watched me, his face unreadable. Then he set down his fork with deliberate care. "That depends on whose law we're discussing. Mine, or the city's." The confirmation of what I'd suspected sent ice through my veins. Dante Caruso wasn't just a businessman. He was something darker, more dangerous. "I see," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Do you?" He leaned forward slightly. "Do you understand what I'm offering you, Eleanor? Not just financial security, but real power. A place at my side in a world few ever glimpse, let alone enter." "Why me?" I asked, the question that had haunted me since that first night at Angelini's. "Out of all the people you could choose, why a waitress with no connections, no experience, nothing to offer but desperation?" Something shifted in his gaze. A calculation made, a decision reached. "Because I've been watching you for longer than you realize. Your resilience, your loyalty to your father, your intelligence despite limited opportunities. And because you remind me of someone I once knew. The admission raised more questions than it answered. Who? That's a story for another time, he signaled, and the server appeared with our main course. For now, all you need to know is that I'm offering you a choice. Continue as you have been, managing my legitimate affairs, enjoying the benefits of my protection and generosity. Or, I prompted when he paused. Or step further into my world, see everything, know everything. With greater rewards, but also greater risks, the choice hung between us, heavy with implication. I thought of Dad, finally receiving the care he needed. Of the apartment, the security, the end to constant worry about money, and of the darkness I'd glimpsed in Dante's eyes, the blood on his cuff, the fear he inspired in others. What would happen if I chose neither? I asked softly. If I walked away? His expression didn't change, but something cold entered his eyes. I think you're intelligent enough to know that's not a real option, Eleanor. You've already seen too much. The threat was veiled but unmistakable. There was no walking away from Dante Caruso. Not now, perhaps not ever. I need time, I said finally, to think about what you're offering. He nodded once, as if my answer was exactly what he'd expected. Take the weekend. We'll speak again on Monday. The rest of the meal passed in tense silence, the food turning to ash in my mouth as I contemplated the trap I'd willingly walked into and the impossible choice that lay before me. The weekend passed in a strange limbo. I spent most of it with Dad, helping him adjust to the new apartment, learning the routines Sarah had established for his care. His condition seemed to improve almost immediately in the more comfortable surroundings. His breathing easier, his pain more manageable, his spirits lifting as he realized we weren't constantly on the edge of financial ruin. It's good to see you smile again, I told him Sunday afternoon as we sat by the window overlooking the park. His weathered hand covered mine. It's good not to worry about leaving you with nothing but debt. He studied my face, his eyes, so like my own, searching for something. But I'm worried about the price you're paying for all this, Ellie. I looked away, unable to meet his gaze. I hadn't told him about my dinner with Dante, about the choice presented to me. How could I explain that I'd inadvertently tied us to a man who operated outside the law, who had all but admitted he was involved in something dangerous, something criminal? Mr. Caruso has been nothing but professional. I lied, the words tasting bitter. Dad's grip on my hand tightened. I've been watching the news, Ellie, reading the papers. Your boss's name comes up in interesting contexts. Always cleared, always just on the periphery of investigations, but always there. My stomach clenched. What are you saying? I'm saying be careful. Men like that, they don't see people. They see pieces on a chessboard. Useful until they're not. I thought of Dante's words. I take care of what's mine, and the possessiveness in his gaze when he looked at me. Whatever game he was playing, I wasn't just a pawn to him, but that realization brought little comfort. Monday morning arrived with the now familiar routine. Marco waiting with the car, the drive to Dante's office, Vivian's cool efficiency as she briefed me on the day's schedule. But there was a subtle difference in how people looked at me, a new wariness in their interactions. Word had spread somehow that I'd been invited to Dante's home, that I was more than just his assistant. Vivian confirmed as much when she cornered me in the break room, her voice low and urgent. Whatever he's offering you, be very sure before you accept. Once you're in his inner circle, there's no leaving. Before I could question her further, her professional mask slid back into place, and she was once again the efficient administrator, discussing appointment schedules and email protocols, as if she hadn't just issued a warning. The day passed in a blur of meetings and phone calls, Dante's legitimate business empire impressive in its scope and complexity. He moved through it all with practiced ease, always watching me from the corner of his eye, gauging my reactions, my competence, my loyalty. It wasn't until late afternoon that we were alone, the office emptying as employees headed home. Dante beckoned me into his private office, closing the door behind us. "Have you made your decision?" he asked without preamble, leaning against his desk with casual grace that didn't quite mask the tension in his shoulders. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "Before I answer, I need to know something. Who am I to you? Really? Why this interest in my life, my father's care, my future? For a long moment, he simply studied me, something calculating and yet almost vulnerable in his gaze. Then he moved to the window, looking out over the city he seemed to control. Your mother's name was Catherine, he said quietly. She worked as a bartender at one of my clubs, 25 years ago. The unexpected direction caught me off guard. You knew my mother? He turned back to face me, his expression unreadable. She was beautiful, intelligent, determined to create a better life for herself. Much like you. A cold feeling spread through my chest. She died when I was 3. I barely remember her. Car accident. Dante nodded. Or so the official report stated. What do you mean? My voice had risen, shock making it difficult to maintain my composure. What are you saying? Dante's eyes held mine, dark and impenetrable. Your mother became involved with a man in my organization, someone who was skimming money, betraying my family's trust. When we discovered his deception, he attempted to flee with Catherine and you. The room seemed to tilt around me. My father is not your biological father, Dante said bluntly. Thomas Bennett adopted you after your mother's death, gave you his name, raised you as his own. A good man by all accounts, but not your blood. My legs threatened to give out. I sank into the nearest chair, mind reeling. You're lying. I have no reason to lie, Eleanor. His voice had softened, almost gentle now. Your biological father was killed in the aftermath of his betrayal. Your mother's death was collateral damage, a tragedy that should have been avoided. Tears burned behind my eyes. And me? Why didn't I die too? Something flashed across Dante's face. Regret, you were found in the back seat of the car, unharmed. My father made the decision to spare you, to allow Bennett to adopt you when he came forward, to give you a chance at a normal life. Your father, I repeated numbly. So, you're telling me your family had my parents killed, orphaned me, and now, what? You feel guilty? Is that what this is? Assuaging your conscience by helping the poor little orphan girl? Anger flared in his eyes, there and gone in an instant. It's not that simple. The rules of our world are absolute. Betrayal means death. But innocence should be protected when possible. You were an innocent. And now? My voice shook with emotion. What am I now? Dante moved closer, his presence filling the space between us. Now you're a woman I've been watching for years, making sure you were safe, provided for in small ways. The scholarship that paid for your first year of college before your father's accident, the landlord who mysteriously forgave a month's rent when you were struggling, the doctor who accepted partial payment for your father's treatment, all my doing. The revelation sent shockwaves through me. My entire life had been shadowed by this man, manipulated in ways I never suspected. Why reveal yourself now? I demanded. Why this job, this apartment, all of it? Because I saw how close to the edge you were getting, how desperate. He knelt before me, his eyes level with mine, and because I've come to admire your resilience, your loyalty, your fire, qualities we share. I shook my head, trying to process the bombshell he'd dropped. So what am I to you? A charity case? A responsibility? A way to make amends for your family killing my mother? You're a loose end I've chosen to weave back into the fabric of my life, he said simply, and potentially much more, if you choose it. The implication hung between us, heavy with possibility. The choice you offered me Friday night. To stay on the periphery or step fully into your world. Yes. His hand came to rest on the arm of my chair, not quite touching me, but close enough that I could feel the heat of his skin. But now you understand the context. This isn't random chance or charity. This is reclaiming what was always meant to be part of my family's orbit. I stood abruptly, needing distance from his overwhelming presence. I need time to process this, to verify what you've told me. Of course. He rose smoothly, giving me space. Though you won't find much in official records. My family has always been careful about what truths reach paper. Your family, I echoed. What exactly does that mean? What are you, Dante? His smile was thin, almost predatory. I think you've already figured that out, Eleanor. I'm the head of one of Chicago's oldest and most powerful families. Some call it organized crime. I prefer to think of it as an alternative governance structure. The confirmation of what I'd suspected sent ice through my veins, even as a strange calm settled over me. Finally, the truth. Or at least, some version of it. And if I choose to walk away now? I asked quietly. His expression hardened. As I said Friday, that's not a real option. But there are degrees of involvement. You could continue as you have been, managing my legitimate businesses, enjoying my protection, keeping your father comfortable. Or you could step fully into my confidence, become truly part of my inner circle, with all the privileges and responsibilities that entails. Become part of the family business, I clarified, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. The one that killed my mother. Dante didn't flinch from the accusation. The past cannot be changed. I'm offering you a future, Eleanor. One where you never have to worry about money or security again. One where you have real power. I turned away, moving to the window to look out at the city spread below us. A city where, apparently, Dante Caruso's influence reached into shadows I'd never imagined. What about my father, Thomas? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. What happens to him if I say no? He'll continue to receive the best care, Dante said, and I believed him. That was never contingent on your decision. The relief that flooded me was momentary. But I'd still be watched, controlled in ways I might not even realize. Protected, he corrected. But yes, you know too much now to ever be completely free of my oversight. I closed my eyes, weighing my options, my future, the shattered pieces of my past that Dante had just handed me. When I opened them again, my decision was made. Turning to face him, I lifted my chin. I'll stay. I'll work for you, learn from you. But I won't be owned by you, Dante. Whatever my mother's fate, whatever my biological father's crimes, I am my own person. Something like admiration flickered in his dark eyes. I would expect nothing less. Your spirit is part of what drew me to you in the first place. He moved closer, stopping just short of touching me. There's one more thing you should know, Eleanor. My interest in you isn't purely business. Surely you've felt it. This connection between us, my breath caught. Of course I'd felt it. The electricity when he was near, the way his gaze made my skin warm, the complicated attraction I'd been fighting since that first night at Angelini's. That would be inappropriate, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Given our history, we make our own rules, he murmured, his hand coming up to brush a strand of hair from my face. The touch sent sparks across my skin. We define our own boundaries. For a heartbeat, I thought he might kiss me. Part of me, a part I wasn't proud of, wanted him to. Instead, he stepped back, professional mask sliding back into place. Take the rest of the day. Process what you've learned. Tomorrow, we begin your real education in how my world works. I nodded, gathering my composure. Tomorrow, then. As Marco drove me back to the apartment, I watched the city pass by outside the window. The same streets I'd known all my life, suddenly transformed by the knowledge that they belonged, in some shadowy way, to Dante Caruso, to the man who had been silently shaping my life for years, the man who might have been responsible for orphaning me, and who now offered me a place in his dangerous world. A world I had just agreed to enter, eyes wide open, choosing power and protection over the illusion of freedom. Dad, Thomas, was waiting when I arrived home, his expression lighting up at the sight of me. I felt a fresh wave of gratitude for this man who had chosen me, raised me, loved me without reservation. "Everything okay, Ellie?" he asked, seeing something in my face. I sat beside him, taking his hand in mine. "It will be," I said with newfound determination. "I'm going to make sure of it. Whatever game Dante Caruso was playing, whatever he ultimately wanted from me, I would find my own path through it. I would protect what was mine, just as fiercely as he protected what was his. And perhaps in time, I would discover the full truth about my past, about my mother, about the complex, dangerous man who had drawn me into his orbit. For now, I had made my choice. Tomorrow would be the first day of my new life, not just as Dante's assistant, but as someone beginning to step into her own power. A power I intended to wield on my own terms, regardless of what Dante had planned.